everybody has something to say. That's the other basic principle, is everybody has stories, everybody has life history that they really want to share. And Toastmasters helps you do that.
Toast and Tea, where we have all the tea, tips, and stories, here to inspire you. Hosted by Little Norway's Toastmasters. Welcome to our podcast, Toast and Tea, hosted by Little Norway's Toastmasters. I'm the host for today's episode. My name is Shantia Crowley. Today we have the honor of welcoming an esteemed member of Little Norway Toastmasters, Bobbie Moore. While Toastmasters International is celebrating their 100th year anniversary, Bobbie is celebrating her 30th. Having joined at the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, years ago, she continued her commitment to Toastmasters as she traded her East Coast lifestyle for the West Coast, Washington state, and mild weather. She has written for the Kitsap Daily News, is Commissioner 1 for Kingston's Village Green Metropolitan Park District, for which she played a vital role in getting the Village Green Center built. Bobbie has taken on numerous leadership roles at Toastmasters. Her active listening skills are simply magnificent. No doubt a byproduct of her vast library and penchant for history. Bobbie, what brought you to Toastmasters that fateful day 30 years ago?
Well, Shantia, I realized that I needed to develop confidence in public speaking, especially in thinking off the top of my head. I had a great deal of difficulty organizing thoughts without massive preparation. And when I moved with my husband, actually from the West Coast back to the East Coast, and we were both located outside of Washington, D.C., it was really apparent that I needed to brush up public speaking skills. And I did not realize that there would be all these other dimensions to Toastmasters, including active listening, providing feedback, we call them evaluations, and just sort of having fun in this structured environment. It was beyond my imagination that it would have all these other dimensions. So it just started with a simple need to be able to organize my thoughts when standing before a group. And it helped me to launch a chapter of my career that involved consulting and actually doing adult workplace training. So it's been a great journey.
And how did you find out about Toastmasters? Was it through word of mouth, a friend?
That's a good question. I can't remember ever not knowing that there was a group called Toastmasters. But for those of you that have ever spent any time in the DC area, you'll know that professional development is just kind of the name of the game there. It's everybody trying to achieve maximum self-actualization. So I suppose it was evident because this was long before there was an active internet. I think it was just advertised in bulletin boards and workplaces. So.
And did you join when you joined? Did you join with a group of people? Did you just walk in yourself and decide to be the courageous one?
I just walked in myself because I knew, for one thing, it was one of the few places I could actually walk from where we lived in DC. In Arlington, actually pass through a shopping mall parking lot and cross a giant boulevard, and there you were in the Pentagon. And it was a breakfast meeting early in the morning, 7:30, I think. And It was just, I had this idea that it would be like going to the dentist. It would hurt, but it would be good for you. And in fact, it was all the opposite. It was good practice in meeting manners and listening, and warmly welcomed. Just total 180 degrees from my expectations. Didn't have to jump through any hoops. People welcomed me, and we were off and running.
I would have to agree. It's been this that's the same reason as to why I feel called to come back every time. It's that warm welcome that I get and receive, and that continuous positive it's a positive environment. It's this very supportive environment where people are encouraging you to want
That's
to be
it.
better. And we most certainly need that because sometimes we don't get that outside in other areas of life, even in the workplace, where it could be either competitive or people are just so focused on what they're doing. They're not thinking about hey, how are you feeling? Or how are you building your confidence skills? So Toastmasters is built specifically to address that.
Yeah. And I think, having been then in several Toastmasters clubs after that in a couple of different states, I was aware that they're not completely uniform. And I did have somebody tell me that it's sort of like a support group. You have to be sure. So it's kind of like a support group for people who really want to up their communication skills. And if you're not completely satisfied with the group that you, for when you first encounter them, you find another one, because there are just lots and lots of Toastmasters groups to choose from. But I think really the idea that people are, as you said, Shantia, genuinely interested in helping each other develop their skills, these basic skills in life, um, accounts for the fact that you and I both feel that that's what you get there. You get a welcome and genuine interest in who you are and what you have to say. And everybody has something to say. That's the other basic principle, is everybody has stories, everybody has life history that they really want to share. And Toastmasters helps you do that.
So Bobbie, 30 years. I
Yeah.
mean, we have a hard time sometimes getting people to want to stay committed if they could stay consistent, like just be consistent with, you know, the minor commitment. 30 years. How did you stay committed to this organization for so long?
Well, I think because you get from it what you put into it. So there's always this promise of a payback. And I think where we live now in Washington State, we have found there's a very active volunteer life here because our community is unincorporated. So volunteers do what government usually does. And I think we find that these are the best run meetings that we go to. They make the best use of your time. It's worth setting aside time to go to Toastmasters. Now, I'm at this point not actively pursuing a specific goal in Toastmasters, but I think what I enjoy as much as anything else currently is mentoring people who are coming along behind us, because you've had this great experience of sort of seeing your own skills develop, and you'd like to share that. And plus, we used to say to each other, you never know what you're going to hear in Toastmasters, because people are inclined to tell their stories. And then the other axiom was, there's no such thing as an ordinary person. So this is a chance to meet people who have this, in some cases, they're hidden gems. They have not a severe, any kind of complex about being too shy, but they're not really into blowing their own horns. So sometimes they have to be encouraged to share their stories. And it's remarkable, really, what we learn from each other in Toastmasters. We're really talking about real things and talking about who we are and what we've experienced and what sort of challenges we're facing in the world and how to deal with those challenges. It's real topics. It's real life. So it's a lot better than most meetings I go to.
So you mentioned that your goals have essentially evolved since you've been in Toastmasters for 30 years. And right now you're in a place where you're wanting to give back, mainly, it seems like.
Mhm.
What were some of the goals before that you feel like you've gone down those winding roads, and what were some of your other goals that you had when you were throughout
Well,
your
the chief
Toastmaster
one,
journey?
yeah, the chief one you alluded to is a project we had here in town to build a brand new community center as a community run project. And there were so many opportunities to present our ideas to others who could help us with funding, to the legislature, for example, and to other groups in town that deliver a status to the Chamber of Commerce, to lots and lots of opportunities. And in particular, sort of go back to the trips to the state capitol to lobby the legislature for funding. And really a very good thing, a very big part of Toastmasters, we do this in every meeting, is practice extemporaneous speaking. And so it's both you can prepare for it, but generally you don't know the question that's coming, and you have 1 to 2 minutes to give an answer, organize your thoughts and give an answer. And actually that's perfect for making testimony and pleas to the legislature for funding, because they have strict limits. Sometimes they'll cut it back to less than 2 minutes. So learning to do that was really important. I never envisioned that as something that I was shooting for when I first joined Toastmasters, but it certainly was opportune to have those skills.
Do you feel like you noticed a distinct difference in yourself after joining Toastmasters? And I mean, is there a particular experience or time where it was noticeable to you?
I think my colleagues here in our community noted that on those trips to our state capital to lobby the legislature and make presentations there, and later that it was clear that here was this passion that we all shared for this project. And then they were amazed at how sometimes when you wanted to talk to a legislature, you were actually in the lobby, which is why they call it lobbying. And you had 1 minute to 2 minutes, if that. So just I think feedback that I got from people outside Toastmasters, that how do you do that? Well, it's like a lot of things that that look easy, that involve having spent lots and lots of hours practicing, learning how to do it.
Yes, funny enough, when I was networking on the phone the other day with someone, they actually mentioned, they're like, you have a really good voice. Like my phone presence or something, like my voice. And I was like, I've never heard that comment before. I've never heard someone say, oh, you have a really good voice. And that was the distinction
Mhm.
between it was something that they distinguished me by because we were just meeting each other on the phone for the first time. And they kept mentioning it. And I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure that Toastmasters has played a significant role in helping me with that to have dis, a first impression that I can make. And it sounds like the impression that your colleagues were getting from you was overall very positive, very positive, perhaps quite confident. So I found that really interesting
Yeah.
that they were just like, you have a nice voice. You have a really good, my phone presence sucks. You have a really good phone presence. And I'm like, what? Toastmasters is where I'm acquiring these skills, and this is where I'm learning how to do it the best.
Yeah.
So earlier you said that sometimes you've been at different clubs, you've experienced different club cultures. And as I was in the director status meeting today, people have mentioned that they've had to kind of urge people or help people to join other clubs because they realized that their club culture wasn't the right fit
Mm.
for them, which is interesting. Because as me being relatively new to leadership roles, that's something I'm starting to notice is that sometimes the club culture doesn't fit everyone.
That could be. That could be. I haven't had that experience myself, but when when we moved to Rhode Island before coming back to Washington State, we actually formed a new club. So and the thing is, it was just like standing on the sidelines and almost like waving a wand, because there was this definite need for speaking presentation skills. So this was a workplace where people relied again on outsiders for funding their projects. These were people who were professional engineers who had very large programs that needed to be funded by people in Washington, D.C. And they found that they needed these very skills. They needed to be able to succinctly state what their program was for and what their funding need was. And nobody had ever presented them with this package of skills, this opportunity to develop this package of skills. So we formed that club in record time. It was 9 months or something. And it was, 20 people who had just sort of been waiting for this to come along. And it was very satisfying because the culture of the club was, it didn't exist before all these people said, this is what we're here for. We're here to accomplish certain goals, and we're here to help each other accomplish them. And it was a blend of people who were different sorts of positions in the company, the local company, and outside the company, family members. And so that was very gratifying. And it was obvious that the culture of the club was, and we continue to stay in touch with the people that now that we no longer live there. And they say it's the same club all these years later, 20 years later in this case. They're um, they take it seriously, but they have fun and they help each other. So I haven't experienced that personally, but I did talk to a relative who was in Atlanta and a member of Toastmasters. And she said it was an extremely competitive club. Well, that wouldn't work for me very well. But I think that would be obvious to you from the beginning. Yeah. So, no, I haven't had that experience myself personally, but I do know that the club that we helped to form in Rhode Island was a very distinctive culture and quite different from Little Norway, where we're working on. It's more informal, I guess I'd say.
I agree. And that's why when I created the podcast, I had to think about it for a second. How did we want to communicate our club? Well, I don't have to think about it. We sort of already have a club culture that's developed, but I did have to think about it for a minute when I was choosing to design our platform, seeing what images would go well with it. So we
Mhm.
don't have enough time to go into depth about it, but in the future, I would love to have a deeper conversation with you about pathways because I know you've had a certain experience, but I really think we have to have that real conversation, and I would love to have a broader conversation about pathways and your experience with that. The last thing I wanted to ask you about is your experience with Kitsap Daily. You're a writer.
Well, I did write for, and it was a monthly newspaper that's affiliated with the Kitsap papers. And actually, I specifically wrote a column when I was helping to take care of my mother in her last years. And I called it Aging Matters. And gosh, it was so gratifying to do that because people would stop me in the grocery store and say, wow, that was information that I really found useful. So I'm not sure that it would have been helpful in a major metropolitan area or anything like that, but there was definitely local readership that was attached to the things I was writing about. So that was fun. Not
Do you,
much time for it now.
yeah. So do you feel like that experience with Kitsap Daily, did that inform your experience with Toastmasters or vice versa?
I think it's more like I have always taken writing really seriously, and I used to always write out speeches, which is a little laborious, and then you almost are locked into memorizing the speech. So Toastmasters has sort of helped me move away from that, but I think it was writing and the focus on writing that gave me the notion that I could succeed at Toastmasters, because the written word is really important to me. And I've never actually succeeded at winging delivering a speech. I have to prepare it. I no longer write them out word for word, but finding the right word is very important to me. So there you go. I appreciate the question. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms before.
It's so funny. I love that we're getting different conversations because that's exactly what David's goal was through Toastmasters was learning how to wing it.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should modify my goal to learning how to wing it as well, because he does do a great job of winging it since that was his intention.
He
And
does.
your intention is your usage of the words, your verbiage. I feel
Mhm.
like when you go up to the lectern and you're talking, you have those pauses and you're very intentional about words, how you say them, and which fancy words you use, and it draws the audience to listen to you. It pulls us in. And I you can tell you are a reader.
Yeah.
It's not surprising to me when you're bringing these huge books. into our Toastmasters meeting talking about what you're reading because I can hear it in your speeches, even though you're only up there for 1 or 2 minutes.
Yeah.
It comes across.
Well, I appreciate that feedback. As always, it's very interesting to see how and hear how other people hear you and see you. We don't really have much opportunity for that in life, and certainly not in a constructive way.
Mhm.
So I value that. I value that input very much.
So I'm going to honor the time here. We're going to go ahead and end this episode right here. Bobbie, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you for the opportunity, Shantia. What fun. I've just myself gotten to the point where I listen to podcasts now, and I like what you're doing. And it could really help us get the word out about what Toastmasters is and what the benefits are. So my thanks to you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week for another episode for our podcast. Goodbye.